This is episode number 214. Is that where we're at?
Yes, 214.
When fixed annuities make sense. And so we don't normally do shows about product specific, but there's so much misinformation, there's so much confusion out there that I thought it was important that we had this conversation. But before we do, I want to talk a little bit about biases and define what a bias is, first of all. If we look it up online, it says that a bias is a prejudice in favor or against one thing compared with another. And it's going to play into this conversation that we're going to have about financial tools that you have available to you. And we're going to try to dispel some of the myths and misconceptions around some of these tools. But I want to start it out with a recent experience that I had and why this verse was important to me. Because I was picking up my daughter from dance the other day and got into a conversation about a social issue with another parent. And I found I felt so strongly about this particular issue that we were talking about. It kind of surprised me, actually. And the way that I responded to that person on this particular social issue was, my immediate response was to justify why I believe what I think is good and pure and true, and in doing so. What it kind of does when two people feel strongly about something, there becomes this clash, and then both people kind of go to their camp and they just hunker down and this is what I believe and this is why I believe it, and nobody's going to change my mind. So like normal, a lot of guys out there, I went home that evening just talking to myself, having this conversation. I went out, we had some trees taken down on the property, so I got the splitting maul out and I just started chopping wood. I spent a good hour out there talking.
Good way to release some energy.
Talking to myself, trying to understand, or actually what I'm really doing is justifying my position to myself as I'm sitting out there talking to myself, splitting wood. And then I went to bed. I woke up at 3 o'clock in the morning, my mind just racing, thinking about this discussion that I had with this person. And, my dad used to say to me, he said, Jason, it's okay to talk to yourself, but if you ever catch yourself saying, huh, you got problems.
That's a good advice. I talk to myself all the time, but I haven't done that.
Best conversation I've had in a long time. I just completely agreed with everything I was saying. It was wonderful. But so then afterwards, a couple days after this, I'm chopping wood, I'm losing sleep. And then I started asking myself, after a little bit of time went by, I started asking myself, why does this bother me so much? Why do I feel so strongly about my position in this area? And I'm reminded in that book, 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, that Stephen Covey wrote, he has something in there. He says one of the things that's most important that you understand when you're communicating with people is to first try to understand their position before you ask them to understand yours. So seek first to understand before being understood. And as I think about that advice, I thought to myself, boy, I wish in that moment I could have asked a better question. Like I wish I would have said, well, tell me more about why you believe that to be truth. Tell me more about why you think that is good for society. Tell me more about, when you're sitting down and discussing this with your kids, how you explain to them that this is a good thing. And instead of just getting defensive and kind of going to my position and why I believe what I believe. So anyways, I think it's important that when we understand and recognize that we all have these biases, that we have these strong emotions and strong feelings about certain things, but then to be able to step back and ask yourself the question, well, why do I feel so strongly about this? And just kind of question our position, and then also question our response, because we want to bring more people to the table. We want more people to engage in a dialogue and not create this divisiveness.
Yes.
And so, anyways, we're going to talk about a topic that's controversial.
So Jason, we're doing a show about fixed annuities.
People have biases on these things.
Yeah. So why are we doing a show about fixed annuities today?
There's so much misinformation out there about annuities in general, but and part of the misinformation it comes from the fact that there are so many different types of annuities out there. And today we're just going to be talking only about fixed annuities. But I really want to I want to challenge people's thinking on this topic and subject. And I want to dispel some of the most common myths and misconceptions that I hear coming from people when it comes to a discussion around annuities, but specifically fixed annuities.
Great. Let's go ahead.
So when we think about some of the myths and misconceptions, there are a couple that I want to make sure we address. The first one is annuities are sold, not bought, and only unsophisticated or uneducated people buy them. So there's kind of this sense that, well, if you are really intelligent, if you're well-read, if you're sophisticated, that you would never buy a fixed annuity.
Interesting.
The second one is annuities are only sold because of the high commission that insurance agents make selling them. That people would never want an annuity just if they're logical, rational people. People are only sold these products. The next one that we want to challenge is why would you lock up your money in an annuity when you could use other tools like bonds to create income for your portfolio or create some kind of safety net in your portfolio? So that's one that we hear. And then I want to talk about conflicts of interest, because at our firm, we operate as a fiduciary, which means we have a legal obligation to act in people's best interests. But I want to talk about a conflict of interest that people don't talk about. People talk about the conflict of interest of receiving a commission for selling a product, but they don't really talk about the other conflict of interest that is equally important and a big one that could be causing people some harm as they're preparing for retirement. So those are the areas that I want to cover today.
Well, great. Let's go ahead and get started with the first idea then, that only unsophisticated or uneducated people buy or recommend annuities.
Yeah. So I'm going to start with the description of somebody who owns a fixed annuity. This person is an American economist, a professor at Princeton, and at the time, he's no longer there, but I don't believe so, at least. And he chaired the Department of Economics at Princeton. He served as chairman for George W. Bush's Council of Economic Advisors. He was nominated by both George W. Bush and Barack Obama as chairman of the Federal Reserve. And he held that position starting in 2006, just before the financial crisis hit. And of course, most people by now recognize this as a Federal Reserve Chairman, Ben Bernanke. Well, when Federal Reserve Chairman Ben Bernanke took office, he had to disclose the financial assets that he owned. Oh. And one of the largest financial assets that he owned when he took that position was a fixed annuity. Wow. So we have to kind of scratch our head a little bit and say, wait a second. Remember back where we were, the market was running hot. The financial situation in our economy was really good. And here comes this guy who is one of the most influential people in the economy, and one of the largest assets that he personally owned at the time was a fixed annuity. Now, if that doesn't make you scratch your head a little bit and even challenge your perception that only unsophisticated, uneducated people are out there buying something like a fixed annuity, well, I think for a lot of people that shatters some of their thoughts that they had that annuities are sold, not bought. Because here's a guy going into the financial crisis where one of his largest assets was a fixed annuity. Interesting. Yes. Now, you could say, well, that's an anomaly. But I have Robert Shiller's book here in front of me, Irrational Exuberance, the second edition of his book. And when you turn to his book, now he's a Nobel Prize winning economist. And here's what he writes. So this is on page 222. He says, he's speaking about pension fund managers, but he's saying they should instead recommend greater diversification and suggest that a substantial fraction of balances be put into safe investments, such as inflation-indexed government bonds. They should promote inflation-indexed retirement annuities and urge retirees to take their retirement income in this form. Wow. So now we've got the Federal Reserve Chairman who owns fixed annuities. We've got Nobel Prize winning economist Robert Shiller, who says maybe pension fund managers should consider not over-relying on the stock market to make sure that they can make good on their promises to pay these pensions out.